Communication is the delivery system for leadership. So it's how our vision is shared. It's how our expectations are clarified with a group. It's how we give feedback to our colleagues and peers and partners. Your effectiveness as a communicator determines how well those leadership moments land and what people remember about you. Great communication isn't just nice to have, it's essential because it is the delivery system of your approach.
Welcome to Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today, we're diving into a leadership topic that shows up in every great leader, whether in healthcare, business, education, or the military. That's communication. I often refer to it as the leadership superpower, and I can't think of anyone better to explore that idea with than Amanda Schagane. Amanda is a recognized expert in leadership and organizational development at the University of Kentucky Healthcare. She's worked with leaders at every level to improve communication, strengthen teams, and build thriving organizational cultures. Today, we're going to talk about how leaders can harness the power of communication to drive performance, strengthen trust, and lead with authenticity. Amanda, welcome to the Science of Leadership.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, Amanda, I usually like to launch the discussion by defining our subject, which in this case obviously is communication. I'm sure our listeners all feel pretty well versed in it and communicating, and we've had some prior episodes talking about different facets of communication. And principally, we've been doing it our whole lives, really. So today, really what I think we want to be talking about is effective communication. And that is different than just communication per se. So maybe it'd be good to define effective communication. So when you teach and train people on leadership and communication, how do you define effective communication?
Keyword effective there, right? I define effective communication as the ability to convey messages in a way that's not just heard, but understood. And more importantly, that they can inspire the right actions and responses in the people that we're trying to communicate with. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it and when you say it, and if it aligns with the emotional tone and context of the moment. I often ask leaders that I'm coaching to consider, did the message you're trying to communicate, did it move people toward clarity? Did it move them toward trust? Did it move action if that's what you're hoping to do? And if not, we have some work to do.
Thanks for sharing that. What I'm hearing there is intention. It's a
Mhm.
it's a mindset, almost a way of being, and that kind of reminds me of a paper by a couple of folks, Brent Rubin and Ralph Gigliotti, in which they wrote, "Communication is considerably more than a leadership tool or strategy. Rather, it's an orientation, a worldview, a way of understanding leadership that focuses more broadly on the process of social influence itself." How does that land for you?
It lands well. I absolutely think that resonates with me. I see communication as a reflection of a leader's mindset and their executive presence. It's how we show up in the world. It's how we influence culture in an organization. It's how we create meaning on our teams. Leaders who approach communication as a relationship, not just a task, not a thing that we have to do, but it's a relationship. They foster environments of psychological safety and trust. And that's essential for high performance, which every organization wants.
Really are drilling into this straight in. I mean, I think that it is about developing trust. It's not an instrument. Again, it's this way of being. It's a way of thinking. It's more than just broadcast, right? It's connection. It's the modality, in a sense, by which we connect with other humans, whether that's verbal, nonverbal, written, sign language, whatever it may be. It's that modality, and fundamentally, it is the essence, the purest instrument of leadership. Because it doesn't matter, I've got this model of leadership that I've developed that has 4 parts, and communication is the last one. And in my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, communication is the last that I talk about. You may have the greatest character, you may have the most competence, you may care the most about people, but if you cannot convey that, which is communication, right? If you cannot communicate that to those people that you hope to lead, you're not going to be able to lead them, right? And so just as I hear you say that, that's what I'm struck by, is that it's more than just a tactic or a skill per se. It's an attitude of approach to another human.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that.
My own scientific studies, as well as my experience, I think it's probably the most underdeveloped skill in a leader's toolkit. What would you say with that?
I completely agree with that because communication's often assumed. We think that because we send an email or I'm talking to you or speaking, that we've communicated and that it's effective, but that's not the case because real communication's a two-way street. It requires that presence and emotional intelligence and intentionality. It's much more complex than that. And it's one of the few leadership skills that shows up in every single interaction that we have. Whether you're an aspiring leader or a C-suite executive, it's something that shows up in every engagement that we have. So if it's underdeveloped, it can derail trust. It can derail our engagement efforts, our performance over time. It impacts everything.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, this idea, I kind of hit on this before in some other episodes, but that it's not about transmit only. In fact, I would say that it's less about transmit. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. But just as I think about it, one of the most powerful ways that we can influence someone is by keeping our mouth shut and listening to what they have to say, where they're coming from, because it shows them that we value them, that they're important, that what they have to say is worthwhile. And when that occurs, again, it gets the trust, it builds trust, it fosters a relationship that then allows us as leaders to have that impact, that influence.
Really effective communication is really about listening too. It's not just about the words that we say or what we're typing. It's about how we incorporate feedback that we heard from someone to say, look, I hear you saying X, Y, and Z, and I disagree because this and that. And it's how we can respectfully disagree with people, how we can engage in healthy debate. We can disagree and talk about hard things and be effective in our strategy. We can do it in a kind and compassionate way, but we need to do that in a way that is respectful and that we're tapping those listening skills too. That's essential.
Yeah. Well, I know you've worked with and helped develop leaders across UK healthcare. Do you have a story that you could share that demonstrates what excellent communication from a leader really looks like?
Yeah, yeah. One story that's come into mind for me involves one of my favorite senior leaders. I respect her so much. So I'll tell a story about her leadership style and approach. I'll give an example. So this leader realized through increased incident reporting and elevated complaints that some of her frontline managers were having challenges enforcing policy consistently and that was impacting their effectiveness as a leader. So, for example, attendance policy when the weather's bad outside, consistently enforcing that, or enforcing due process for employee relations issues if we're having challenges around that. But what she did that I really respect is she asked for help. She reached out to our organizational development team, our HR business partner team, and asked us to help her host a series of listening sessions with these managers. So she asked for help. And what made her communication strategy particularly effective in this scenario is how she opened up these sessions. She did so well. She told them that their voice was important. She told them that we can only get better if we have hard conversations. She said we have the ability to do better and that she believes in them. She's empowering them in the conversation. She created that safe space for them to share their concerns. So we do these listening sessions and using that content, our HR teams help to build some really intensive and customized simulations to help those leaders practice some of their most challenging employee relations issues. And during those simulations, this leader opened those sessions and she reiterated the same thing. You're valuable. I want to empower you by telling you how capable you are of growth, that growth mindset piece. And after those simulations, 84% of the participants that participated in them reported increased confidence in navigating complex employee relations issues. And this leader made that happen through her very intentional efforts to create a psychologically safe environment in which these managers could work on these skill sets together to learn from each other. And she even followed up with how proud she was of the group for taking time and effort to work on it. I just think her strategy was top tier. She really empowered this group to work on it.
That is really a clear demonstration of empowerment, encouragement of those folks that she undertook, and a great example. Thanks for sharing that. Something I'm wondering just now, thinking about. I mean, clearly that was a real win sort of scenario, but I'm just wondering, what do you think are the barriers to effective communication for leaders?
A couple of things come to mind on that one. One big is assumptions. We assume that others understand our message or that it's landed in the way that we intended, but that's not always the case. And leaders in any organization are often so pressed for time that in our haste, we forget that communication's a leadership act. It's not just an afterthought. We have to be really intentional about our words and our tone. And another barrier that's coming to mind is emotional reactivity in communication. If leaders haven't developed an awareness of their own triggers, if we're going into communication really hot, then we're
Mm.
not going to be effective. The communication under stress can really confuse or alienate teams because the tone doesn't match the content. Sometimes we have to be so intentional about that.
Hey, I'm breaking into the podcast conversation here to share with you an exciting announcement. If you've been following the Science of Leadership podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about the book I've been working on. Well, I'm delighted to share that after over 3 years of work, my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, is finally available. I'm so proud of this book and what it represents. I'm certain that you're going to find it immensely interesting and helpful as a guide on your journey to becoming a better leader. Seriously, you don't want to miss this book. I'm including a link to the book in the description. I hope you'll order your copy today. And please share it with others who might be interested. Also, please be sure to share your thoughts about the book with me. Now, let's get back to this interesting conversation on the science of leadership. Oh, tone.
It's
Oh,
hard.
tone is the bane of my existence
It's
because
so hard.
I, I will say, apparently, I'm totally oblivious to this, okay? I've tried so hard. I just apparently at times I develop a tone. My wife, we just passed the 24-year mark this week of
Congratulations.
marital bliss, and it really is. I mean, it's phenomenal. She has amazing superpowers to put up with me for that long. But apparently, there are times when I have a tone, and I think I'm being as level and approachable or what, but and toneless, not intending any tone, but I have some tone that totally derails whatever I'm saying. And so that's something that I've had to work on a lot. And so I think that there are parts of communication that has nothing to do with the words spoken per se, right? In fact, if whatever tone it is dissonant with
Mhm.
what I'm saying, it will produce exactly the opposite effect of whatever I'm saying, so that tone wins out, right? Like we all know, uh, if I said, "Hey, that's a great looking dress," versus "That's a great looking dress."
Absolutely. Tone can be passive aggressive in nature, but if it's dissonant, if you everyone gets hot, everyone gets mad in their communication flow or frustrated. Frustration, very common in the workplace, right? We're not robots. Then saying something in a frustrated tone, but saying like I'm so happy to be here. It equals inauthenticity. We have to be authentic. And sometimes that just means calling it out, just saying, look, I'm frustrated with this situation too, but here's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think, some degree of as we're talking about this, it is emotional intelligence, right? It's recognizing what you're bringing to this attempted communication endeavor, this interaction in the moment. It's understanding where you are emotionally, where the other person is emotionally, and not letting your emotion or their emotion trigger that part of our brain, the amygdala, that hijacks our cortical, our higher level thinking. If we're all by ourselves and calm and cool and collected, we can all write out a beautiful transcript of what we could say in any given moment that would flow wonderfully. And that's great until the moment when emotions come
Yeah.
and it totally derails. So, that idea of emotional intelligence that you're bringing to this is so valuable. As we're kind of talking through this, so we've talked about effective communication and we've started to move into what I would call the so what zone of the podcast, which is, okay, well, why is this important? We're starting to talk about that to some degree, but to fill that out more explicitly, Amanda, why is effective communication so important for leaders?
Consider this. I'm curious if you agree. Communication is the delivery system for leadership. We all have our own leadership style, but the way in which we deliver that style is through communication. So it's how our vision is shared, it's how our expectations are clarified with a group, it's how we give feedback to our colleagues and peers and partners, it's how we build collaborative relationships. Whether you're managing performance or driving change or just checking in on someone that reports to you or a colleague that you care about, your effectiveness as a communicator determines how well those leadership moments land and what people remember about you, what your brand is as a leader, whether your vision and your hope for your style, how it's perceived. So, great communication isn't just nice to have, it's essential because it is the delivery system of your approach.
Amanda, that's brilliant. I agree 100%. I really love the way you frame that, that it's the delivery system. It really is. It kind of gets harkens back to what we were hitting on a little bit earlier in the podcast that all these other factors, if you can have them, but if you don't have the communication, if you can't convey that in a way that the people you're trying to lead receive, it's all for naught, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I agree completely with you.
We can have a big plan for rolling out organizational change, but if we're not effective in the communication, we lose everyone in it.
From your perspective, and I know that you all collect all sorts of data and things for UK healthcare, which is a very large, highly matrixed healthcare organization. But what can you share? It could be a story, it could be something else, data if you have that off the top of your head or whatever. But that shows like how effective communication can really have tremendous impact on an organization.
One example that's coming to mind is about like applied strategy and communication. I'd love to tell you.
Sure.
So, one of our senior leaders created a quarterly listening tour where she's hosting open forums with her group. And in these sessions, her employees have the opportunity to ask questions anonymously, and that helps to, foster that psychological safety. But some of them aren't shy about unmuting and asking hard questions. They can be a tough group. They're not shy about it. And this leader doesn't shy away from those hard questions. Sometimes she'll tell the group that she has to go do some research and she'll report back, and she does. And sometimes she has to tell them disappointing news, and she does that respectfully and in her authentic voice. And now that she's been doing those for a while, she's doing them for about a year and a half now. She's starting to evolve her approach based on the feedback that she receives. That's kind of the lesson that we're learning here is we have to evolve over time. But she's starting to evolve her approach based on feedback that she received because she noticed over time that there are some consistent themes about what the group is asking or what their challenges are. And it's involving certain departments that they're consistently collaborating with. And so her approach is she's going to bring leaders from those departments into those forums, and she's going to interview them using their questions. She's going to give them their voice in a safe way. And she's going to ask those leaders to collaborate on those challenges. So she's bringing those people together to bridge disconnects that exist in our system. Okay. So back to that goal of effective communication that we started with, is she bringing people toward clarity? Is she bringing people toward trust and action? Yeah. Heck yeah, she is. Because over time, she's seen that paid off already because she has increased communication with the group. They approach her more. They feel more comfortable approaching her. And she has seen increased collaborative decision making. We're doing more work groups. We're doing more committee based work. We're talking to people in different specialty areas that can influence our work. And those better relationships among her group and those partners impact the whole health system. If we can increase communication between different groups, it helps to bridge those disconnects. I can't think of a better example of bridging those disconnects in a very intentional way and using her authentic voice and strategy and being nimble to what the group is asking at the time. She just pivots. She makes it happen.
Great example. Thanks for sharing that. And
Sure.
for our listeners, Amanda is hitting on a lot of what the research shows us with regards to the importance and impact of effective communications or communication skills. It's vital for leaders, teams, organizations. Earlier, I touched on this meta-analysis that was done by Brent Rubin and Ralph Gigliotti. In that study, they found that communication capability is consistently correlated with leadership effectiveness. So why is that? We've just we've just been hitting on this because great communication builds clarity, fosters trust, strengthens relationships, and that's all elemental with regard to influence, which is the core of leadership. And then Daniel Goleman's work, if we think about that, I was mentioning emotional intelligence earlier, as Amanda was talking about bringing emotion into the conversation. We know from Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence that communication is central to a leader's ability to manage their own emotions, to motivate teams, to resolve conflict. I mean, study after study has shown that highly valuable outcomes are influenced by great communication. 4 outcomes that I could rattle off that we've hit on to some degree: increased trust. When leaders communicate transparently and frequently, it builds trust. Dirks and Farron, I've cited them before on the podcast. They did a meta-analysis and found that a strong link existed between leaders' communication skills and followers' trust. Number 2, improved decision making. Actually, clear communication ensures diverse input, reducing blind spots and increasing the quality of decisions that we make. The Gallup organization did a study that showed that employees who feel informed and heard are more engaged and productive, and communication creates that feeling of being engaged and leads to better productivity. And then the 4th thing is reduced turnover, which is a major thing right now. All sectors are experiencing significant turnover. Communication strengthens those relationship ties, which then make people more likely to stay with a team or organization longer. So these effects are absolutely vital for leaders and those we lead. And so this tells us that I think we can't afford to be ineffective communicators.
I think you're exactly right. And I would just add that communication isn't just about speaking, it's about aligning what you say with what you do. That's how we get the highest yield when we're talking about those data points. The best leaders communicate through consistent behavior. Their actions match their words. And when that happens, we're able to build that culture of integrity and trust and shared purpose that you're talking about. We experience greater retention rates, less turnover, less burnout, as you're saying. And that becomes contagious across an organization. We work for an organization that we're really proud of, that we say, oh, I'm really proud to be on this team. We speak highly of our colleagues and our teammates, and we're more effective. And we say we have more productive and happy moments, right?
I mean, that's integrity,
Mhm.
right? What you say and what you do are unified, and integrity is a fundamental virtue within character, which is a building block of great leadership. So, yeah, right on, right on. Amanda, let's get to some practical advice for our listeners. For those who want to improve their communication as leaders, where should they start? What are the 4 or 5, if you have, if you could rattle off 4 or 5 practical things that they could do this week, no pressure, they could do this week to become more effective communicators?
I've got some ideas on this one. And in our work, we do a lot of coaching with leaders, C suite to like entry level managers. Some of these micro behaviors that you can start to incorporate into your strategy for effective communication are seemingly obvious. Like some of these might surprise you, like, oh, people don't do these. We need to do them more. Pausing before you respond. Okay. Whenever, especially when we're in a situation that's tense or there's some heat in the room or a lot of emotion in the room, sometimes even taking a drink of water before you respond or just that pause, take a beat to listen more deeply and respond more thoughtfully. Okay. We're listening to understand, not to respond.
Mhm.
Okay. Another micro behavior that I'll often coach managers on, especially if they're about to deliver difficult news, it could be a complex employee relations issue, or it could be just taking care of someone who's struggling that reports to you or a colleague that you care about, is to just front in some of the hard words with, my goal is to support you. I'm saying these things because I'm invested in your success. Okay. I want to better understand what's happening. And that is going to land so much better. The yield will be so much better than, why did you do that? We can get to the same content if we say, help me understand how we got here, then why'd you do that? Okay, another one that comes to mind is asking open-ended questions. They really encourage dialogue to help us get depth in a conversation. So if you're really looking for more depth in your relationships, asking really good questions can help. Be careful with why questions. Sometimes they elicit a defensive response, like, why'd you do that? Giving very specific praise, especially for employees that we want to build connection with or build up or grow, mentor. So instead of saying, great job on that, we want to be really specific. I appreciated how clearly you laid out your plan in that meeting, or I saw how caring you were with that patient's family member. You really took time to listen to their concerns and to answer all of their questions. So we're giving really specific feedback about praise and what the employee or our colleagues are doing well. And then maybe a final one to close the loop is to follow up regularly. We hope that our communication flow, the content that we hope will land, but we don't know that unless we check back in, unless we check in with folks. So we need to circle back to check in that our message landed or what actions are being taken. And sometimes that looks like an end of the week note in a healthcare setting. A lot of folks will do that. Sometimes that looks like checking or just catching someone in the hallway or over lunch if you see them in the break room and giving them some feedback. Hey, I just want to make sure in that meeting earlier, I heard my action item was this or that. Just want to make sure. Are we on the same page? And those informal conversations, that informal follow-up means a great deal to people. So those are a couple of things that come to mind. I know there's a slew more, but that's a couple.
Yeah, those are great. Thanks for sharing those. I think they resonate with a few that I had thought of too. So I think those are, I think the more we can reiterate, the better, right? Say it in multiple forms and so forth. But one thing that came to my mind was ask more questions than you give answers, and
Love that.
that's that listening that you said. You said listen, um, don't listen to respond, right? Listen to understand,
Yes. Listen to
and that was
understand, not to
yeah.
respond.
Yeah, that's something that multiple of the four-star generals that I interviewed, that's a mantra that they had. I think it must come from some communication handbook somewhere, because, I've heard that phrase so many times. It's, and I talk about that in the book too. It's really important. I will be honest with you, since trying to incorporate that, I've gotten to a place where sometimes the person gets finished with what they're saying, and I don't have like, I'm kinda left silent for a bit because I've been focused so much on what they're saying.
That's
I've
okay.
been drowning out, any thoughts that I have because I'm just, like, trying to be in the moment with them, uh, and it throws them off. They're so used to people just word vomiting back at them, that suddenly it's like, "Why is this guy silent?" I just stopped talking. That's when most people just start blurting out something, right? And so you have to get used to that silence is okay for a second, and then you can respond. But it's fascinating that people have become so accustomed to others immediately responding. that they don't know what to do when you're really, truly, intently listening.
I think it's more than just okay to have a beat or a silent. Sometimes it's respectful. If we ask a really hard question and someone takes a beat to think about it, that tells me as a communicator that they're being really thoughtful about what words they want to use with me. I respect that.
Yeah. Another thing that I kind of mentioned this just a minute ago is repeat the message in multiple formats. People say, there's that say it 7 ways, 7 times or something like that, so but repeat it in multiple formats, emails and things like that. I say this in part, and then I'm going to expand on something that I've been working on, but a big thing is reflective listening. You talked about listening carefully, and so active listening and reflective listening, kind of the similar thing. Somebody says something, and then you kind of paraphrase back to them, "What I hear you saying is this." And I think that's way better than typical where everybody's just sort of talking beyond each other, right? Like everybody's got their agenda that they're kind of talking, and they're kind of tangential. They're not really engaging head on with each other about the topic because it's just I'm waiting for my turn to throw in my thoughts. And so reflective listening is this idea of I'm going to listen, I'm going to sort of repeat back to you in my own words what I think you said. You're going to clarify that, and and that we assure understanding. And I think that's a good step. But as I've gone through writing this book and really spending a lot of time deeply and thought about these sorts of topics, I don't know if you've there's a book out called Super Communicators. It's by I don't know how he says his last name. I would say Charles Duhigg, Duhigg. That is, it's a good book, and in it he talks about elements for powerful listening or for listening, improving our listening, and it's really talking about how people, the material that of the conversation and where you kind of are in it and where they are in it. He says, okay, what's the topic? How does the speaker, so how, if you were talking to me, Amanda, how does Amanda feel about the topic? What does it mean, kind of mean for her, and so forth. So those 3 things. And so then as I was thinking about it, I was like, I think he's missing something. And so what I arrived at is this 4-part concept of powerful listening. That's what I call it in the book. It's number 1 is content. Okay, what is Amanda talking about? That's the first pass on the information. The second is understanding. Okay, what is Amanda's understanding of the topic? And that isn't like necessarily cognitive understanding per se, but more like position on it or things like that, right? It's multi-layered, I think. The third is what does Amanda really feel about the topic? So it's feeling. So we got content, understanding, feeling. How do you feel about the topic? Let's say we're talking about, for some reason, childhood cancer is coming to my mind. So let's say we're talking about childhood cancer. Maybe you have really intense feelings about that. And you talked about emotions and what people are bringing to it earlier. Okay, there are times when I may think that this topic's really important, and I may have fairly strong opinions about it, but I may be interacting with you, and it may be very clear to me that this is really like level 10 for you. I probably need to back out of my feelings and say, okay, this is probably not the time to engage in that per se, or to question that, right? Because it's not going to go well. So third is feelings, and then the fourth is meaning, and that's what does this topic mean to Amanda, and that connects to feelings, and then so it creates this cycle of content, understanding, feelings, and meaning. And if we can, on some level, go through that as we're listening to people, I think we can take away so much more from what they're saying than if we're just listening to respond, certainly.
I think you're spot on, and I really appreciate the approach, especially around being aware of emotions in the room, not just your own, but trying to pick up on the emotion or the emotional charge of the other person that you're trying to communicate with, and the intentionality around balancing that. There are times that we want to elevate the emotion or the intensity of a conversation, and there are times that we need to diffuse it. There are times we need to bring down the tone, and we can only do that through self-awareness or being in tune to what's going on with the other person. That's a very complex strategy for communication, and it's not easily done.
Yeah, because I was just about to ask you, okay, so how do we do that? But
I wish I had the golden ticket for that one.
yeah, yeah, because I was, as you were saying, I was just thinking, there are certain people, and maybe you have a tip on this. I think there are certain people, personality types. There's a certain personality disorder that when I run into those people, it's called borderline personality. I don't know how I know. There's something. It's like Blink from Malcolm Gladwell, right? Like you just know, right? And that's because I was exposed to it quite a bit as a kid from a couple of people in my family. But when I interact with people like that, like they set me off. Like I have a really intense emotional thing and I have to practice a lot of emotional regulation. I think the emotional component, and you've hit on that multiple times, is the thing probably that derails us the
It does.
most with communication. Do you have any kind of insight other than personal psychological overhaul into how to regulate that, modulate that to some degree when you know that because we all are, hey, we're getting ready to go into this meeting and it's going to be intense, or I've got to talk to this person. We've got to let this person go, or whatever it is, and there's going to be emotion. Do you have any kind of just some thoughts, recommendations on how to be effective and modulate our own emotion in those situations?
The example you gave of, like, borderline as an example, and that's probably one of the more extreme. Sometimes it's working with folks who you perceive as being manipulative in their communication approach, or the strategy, or you hear someone and you perceive them to be inauthentic and not being authentic in their communication. I see that strategy is very similar, and all of those is the calmer you are, the more power you have in your
Mm,
communication approach. That's not always easy. I know that's easy to say and hard to do, but if you can take a beat to check in with your own emotional self-awareness, your own emotional regulation, because when you go into those conversations already hot, it can decrease your effectiveness very quickly. And so if you know that you're working with someone or a patient, for example, who is borderline, or someone who's on the spectrum who may not be able to pick up on social cues of frustration as easily as another example, then we need to go into those conversations very aware of our own triggers, but also with a great deal of empathy that other folks are not as strategic as we are about communication. If we're trying to be strategic about our communication approach, the average person's not. They're just doing what they need to do to survive. They're just out
just
there
coming
doing their
out
thing.
as they
They're
think of
just
it.
saying the words that come up here. Like they're just saying it. But we are, as leaders, we're elevating our communication strategy. We're trying to be more effective and get a higher yield or a higher return on investment ROI from our interactions. And we do that through being really strategic. So we have to manage our expectations with folks like that. And we have to be deliberative with our words and hold our cards close sometimes.
Well, Amanda, thanks for sharing that. I think there's so much that you brought to the conversation today, and I appreciate you have a disarming, and that maybe that's part of your training. Every time I've ever interacted with you, you just got this disarming charm that I think is wonderful. So thanks for bringing that to the science leadership today, and thanks for sharing your perspectives on communication. I think we can all take away a lot of important insights from you.
Thank you. It was a true pleasure to spend time with you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.